My husband is heartbroken. His mistress, dissatisfied with her lack of status, won't let him into her house, so he has no choice but to come back to the main residence every day. I'm getting a headache, because the young man I keep has a great body but not much of a brain. He also made a huge scene. Damn it. Why is he back? Doesn't he have a home of his own? When are you going to divorce? Get divorced. Marry me instead. I'm not leaving. I don't believe he can sleep in your room every day. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. Shen Chang'an returned with a troubled expression once again. Still the same excuse. A group of merchants recently arrived in the west of the city, making noise. It's affecting his studying. During dinner, I subtly asked him, how much longer is that merchant going to keep arguing? Hearing this, he couldn't even eat his meal anymore. He put down his bowl. How should I know? He wasn't sure. He still had to sleep in the main room at night. I hugged the quilt and curled up in the corner, not daring to fall into a deep sleep, afraid that he might suddenly get the urge and make me fulfill my marital duties. He doesn't go to comfort his mistress. But I need to save my energy to use on my mistress. I've known for a long time that Shen Chang'an keeps a mistress. My family used to be merchants, and thanks to my father's incredible luck, we managed to attach ourselves to the then Prince of Yu, who is now the Emperor. I was the one who proposed this marriage with Shen Chang'an, nothing more, simply because he is too handsome. I am a picky person. Having reached over 20 years of age, I have considered countless marriage proposals, but they all fell through because the other party was too unattractive. It wasn't until last year's flower banquet hosted by the Empress that I caught sight of Shen Chang'an at first glance. At that time, he was like an unattainable flower on a high peak, dressed in a moon-white brocade robe. He looked as ethereal as an immortal who had descended to the mortal world. After returning home, I immediately had my father send a matchmaker to the Shen family to sound them out. Shen Chang'an's grandfather is the Marquis of Zhongqin. The Marquis's household has now fallen into decline, while my family is currently in the Emperor's favor. As expected, the marriage was settled. Yet it was Shen Chang'an himself who agreed and personally went to the palace to request the imperial decree for our union. On our wedding day, he pretended to be drunk and refused to consummate the marriage. Later, when I tried to seduce him by undressing, he shut me out. I spent money to please him, but he remained cold and indifferent. He never once touched me. A month after the wedding, he used the excuse of needing peace to study and moved to the house on Huaihua Lane in the west of the city. Another month later, he took in that mistress who could play the pipa. I completely lost interest in him. After all, the untouchable flower on the high peak is indeed tempting, but a dog's tail flower on that same high peak holds no appeal whatsoever, so he went on keeping his mistress. I have my own to keep as well. I heard that his mistress not only plays the pipa quite well but also has a gentle and obedient temperament, a lovely companion who understands him. But I don't know what's happened these past few days. She suddenly started demanding a proper status from him. Without a proper status, Shen Chang'an was not allowed to enter the room, but for the time being, Shen Chang'an could not give her that status, because my marriage to him was an imperial decree. He had no say in the matter. After waiting for 5 days, Shen Chang'an finally went to Locust Blossom Lane again, upon hearing the maid Xiaotao's report. I also changed my clothes and quietly got into the carriage from the back door, heading to Black Cloud Street in the east of the city. I lightly knocked on the door. The door knocker hadn't even been put down yet. A large hand pulled me inside, and kisses came pouring down like a storm, until my body went weak. The tall man buried his head in the crook of my neck, his tone full of accusation. "AW, it's been 5 days, a full 5 days. And you haven't come to see me, touch me. I've missed you so much." Shang Shiyu, the young male entertainer I picked up at the entrance of Nanfeng Pavilion. He's not that young, very big. He has a great figure and excellent skills, very service-oriented. He always holds back himself first, kissing his way up from my calf. He kissed me until I was nearly melted, then asked, may I? This time, he asked the same question, but I refused, no, facing his trembling eyes and incredulous expression. I panted lightly for a while before barely managing to tear my gaze away from his tense, smoothly sculpted upper body. I came today to tell you that I probably won't be able to come over for some time. Something has happened at home, and I can't get away. Although I'm bold, I'm not bold enough to be reckless. To Shang Shiyu, I only said that I was a widowed woman living in seclusion, and even my name was fake. He was tricked into being penniless and sold into the Southern Breeze Pavilion, forced to the brink of taking clients. He fled in disheveled clothes and was coincidentally rescued by me as I passed by. Since then, whatever I said, he believed without question. He's not very bright, easy to coax. But precisely because he wasn't very bright, he had a somewhat stubborn temperament. Are you tired of me? He looked utterly astonished as he spoke. He stood up and began to undo his belt and take off his clothes. Don't get tired of it. You should use it first. Keep using it. Don't abandon me. He was genuinely anxious. As he stripped down until only a loincloth remained, I quickly grabbed his hand. I wanted to refuse, but my gaze swept over the smooth lines of his chest and abdomen, then lingered on a certain spot below his waist. The words on the tip of my tongue changed before I could speak them. Then, shall we give it a try? Shang Shiyu has a handsome face and a great body. Every part of him suits my taste, so when I used him, I went all out, lost myself, and forgot about the world. It wasn't until dusk painted the sky that I weakly climbed off Shang Shiyu's waist and put my clothes back on. I practice what I preach. He finally believed that I wasn't tired of him, but truly couldn't get away. But when I left, he was still reluctant to let go, holding my hand and placing it on his chest and abdomen. Wu. When will you come next time? But I turned cold and withdrew my hand. Shang Shiyu, don't ask for too much. As a mistress, one must have the awareness of a mistress. Fortunately, although Shang Shiyu wasn't very bright, he was obedient. Knowing I was unhappy, his face paled and he immediately stopped talking. He sent me off without saying a word. When getting in the car, I looked back and saw him hanging his head. Looking utterly pitiful, my heart softened, and I couldn't resist patting his head. Don't worry, I'll be here soon. Sigh, let me coax him a little. Without him, where would I find a lover who suits my taste so perfectly? Thinking this, I withdrew my hand. He didn't notice at all that after getting in the car and leaving, Shang Shiyu's expression changed from pitiful to cold as he glanced back. At the street corner, a guard approached, humbly pleading, "Young master, it's really time for you to return." On the way back to the residence, I encountered Shen Chang'an, who had also just finished coaxing his mistress. At the main gate, we got out of our carriages at the same time. I was beaming with joy. His eyes were cold and sharp, but upon closer look, they held a trace of sorrow, and the smell of alcohol lingered around him. Now, seeing that he couldn't even manage to appease a mistress, he had resorted to drowning his sorrows in drink. I felt a faint sense of smugness. My lord, haven't those foreign merchants left yet? I covered my lips with a handkerchief, deliberately provoking him with a coquettish laugh. He snorted coldly and glanced at me. Madam should worry more about yourself. Your pearl hairpin has fallen. Pearl flower. My eyelids twitched. Before I could ponder it further, he had already bypassed me and walked into the mansion. Just as I was about to follow, a figure darted over swiftly, knelt down, and hugged my thigh. Looking down, I saw Shen Chang'an's mistress weeping, her face streaked with tears like a rain-soaked pear blossom. Madam, I beg you to let me follow the young master, even if as a servant or a maid, even if as a concubine. I was shocked. What? The mistress he can't coax? He wouldn't want me to help him coax her, would he? Slowly turning my head, I wanted to ask Shen Chang'an, who was equally stunned, but as my gaze swept across, I saw a tall man standing at the street corner. The man was handsome, but his face was deathly pale. It was Shang Shiyu. He still held my pearl hairpin in his hand. What a headache. Shang Shiyu had a poor memory, and I was worried he would make the situation even more chaotic. I didn't even have the mind to carefully watch Shen Chang'en's embarrassing moment, nor did I have the time to watch, because while I was still in a daze, Tan Susu, who was clinging to my leg, started crying again. "Madam, the heir and I are truly in love. You already hold the title of the heir's wife, so why not allow someone who truly cares for him to be by his side? My father had many concubines, and there were many aunts in the household. I had seen this trick since I was a child." With an unhappy raise of my brow, I rolled my eyes at Shen Chang'en. "Aren't you taking him away?" Hearing this, he finally snapped back to reality, frowned, and asked Tan Susu, "What are you doing?" That question was truly unnecessary for him to ask. Isn't it obvious that they want to escalate the situation, forcing him to make a promise, or pressuring me to commit to a status? But he's not stupid. After asking, he probably realized it himself and ordered in a low voice for Tan Susu to be gagged and dragged away, as if unable to believe it. Until she was taken away, Tan Susu's eyes remained wide open. But I understood. After all, I was familiar with the matter of keeping a mistress behind closed doors. When you ask me for status and I ask you for sincerity, it's all just a game of flirtation. Making a scene in public is really quite inappropriate. Sure enough, before entering the residence, Shen Chang'en's face turned cold. I didn't look at him, but my peripheral glance swept over the spot where Shang Shiyu had been standing. There was no one there anymore. I let out a sigh of relief. Looking at Shen Chang'en's retreating figure, I couldn't help but feel smug again. "See, my mistress is much more obedient than yours. I think I celebrated too soon." Back in the courtyard, on the desk in the bedroom, I spotted the crushed pearl hairpin and the words "left with tea, tomorrow at the hour of the goat." My eyelids twitched. Instantly, that was the only thought left in my mind. I quickly wiped away the water stains and put the pearl flower away. I tossed and turned anxiously in bed at night, unable to sleep. It wasn't until late at night that Shen Chang'en returned again. This time, I didn't know if he had managed to appease her. He didn't light the lamp, just like the previous few days, undressing and getting into bed as if it were the most natural thing. But what was different this time was that he was sleeping facing my side. Could it be that he hadn't managed to appease his mistress, and with his desires unresolved, he intended to use me to satisfy his urges? As soon as this thought crossed my mind, I felt someone tug at the blanket I had tightly wrapped around myself. In the darkness, I sat up abruptly. Turning my head, I saw Shen Chang'en's hand still raised mid-air, not yet lowered. Silence. The air froze. I frowned, unable to hold back. TCH. That sound was like a switch. He also sat up, staring straight at me in the darkness. "Madam, we have been married for nearly half a year. It is time for us to consummate the marriage. Consummate the marriage." If you had said this when we first got married, I would have been quite happy to hear it. After all, during that time, I was genuinely satisfied with him. Of course, it wasn't just because of his looks. It was also because once, while I was drinking at Jengshenju, I happened to overhear him speaking up for my father. At that time, the new emperor had just ascended the throne and promoted my father to the Ministry of Revenue. Everyone in the capital cursed my father. A merchant becomes an official. A huckster enters the court. They mocked him. Yesterday a cloth seller in the marketplace. Today a high official among the red gates. They also said, when merchants gain power, governance is driven by profit, and the people will suffer. Only one voice was different. Appoint officials based on their virtue and talent, and choose those around you based on their character. Since the sage has promoted Lord Ju must possess extraordinary talent. Why do you all need to be so sour and pedantic? That sounds pleasant to hear, and I enjoy hearing it. I wanted to go find him and discuss my father's exceptional qualities with him, but by the time I went downstairs, he had already left. I only managed to catch a glimpse of a moon-white figure in the distance, and heard someone introduce him. That's him, the heir of the loyal and diligent Marquis estate. Young girls are always prone to springtime dreams. Although what I carry is different from what others carry, but after we married, when I presented him with the rare books I had acquired at great expense, he merely glanced at them disdainfully and said, "Tainted by the smell of money," then had them thrown away, and proceeded to keep a mistress in Osmanthus Lane. After that, I completely lost any spring-like feelings for him. In the darkness, I looked at Shen Chang'an's expressionless face. I shook my head decisively. "No, thanks. Besides, I've already had my share of meat today. I'm quite full." That night, I took my quilt and slept in the outer room. Early the next morning, I simply packed my things and got into the carriage. Of course, I wasn't going to Black Cloud Street. I returned to my parents' home, leaving only a letter for Shen Chang'an, troubled by excessive worries, returning home for a temporary stay. When I got home, my mother and aunts were playing cards. It happened to be a day off, so my father was also there, but he couldn't join the game, nor could he get a word in. He could only hold some fruits, timid and hesitant. One moment he asked this one, "Madam, would you like a fresh pear?" The next moment he asked that one, "Lady, you, feeling peckish, let me shell some peanuts for you." But they all found him annoying. "Go away, you're blocking my luck, sir. Why don't you go somewhere cool and stay there?" "All right." He was cowardly and didn't dare to retort a single word. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw me, puffed out his chest, and inexplicably gained confidence. "Chingwei's place is cool. I'll go stay with her." I'm a bit annoyed with him too. Annoyed that he's making a big deal out of yesterday's incident. This Shen Chang'an actually let his mistress cause a scene at the Marquis's estate. Pissing all over you. No way, just wait. I'm going to find someone to beat him up right now. I quickly grabbed hold of the person, in this day and age, who doesn't have a mistress. We should understand him. He didn't understand, and the look he gave me was indescribable. I couldn't be bothered to explain, so I just curled up with him, hastily finished lunch, and then used the excuse of needing rest to shoo him away. Then I changed into plain clothes and quietly slipped out the back door. This time, I didn't dare take a carriage. By the time I walked to Wuyun Street, it was already past the hour of the sheep. Just as I was about to knock, I noticed the door was open. Pushing the door open, the courtyard was eerily quiet. Usually, the moment he heard any movement, Shang Shiyu would eagerly come close, but today he was unusually still. After searching around, I finally found him on the bed. His eyes were closed, his face flushed, his breathing heavy, and a light sweat glistened on his forehead. His clothes hung loosely open, revealing half of his smoothly sculpted chest. Hearing the footsteps, he opened his eyes and looked at me. He didn't say a word, just gazed at me with a pitiful expression, the usual Shang Shiyu, though he had his moments of showing weakness to seek affection. But even when showing weakness, once on this bed, he was as fierce as a dog that hadn't chewed a bone in 800 years. Yet at this moment, lying on the bed, he looked completely at my mercy. This extreme contrast inexplicably made me feel a bit restless. I've never been one to hold back. She walked closer and sat down, pulled open his clothes, and ran her hand over his waist and abdomen. "Shang Shiyu, did you drug yourself?" He sat up abruptly, with an expression of disbelief. He widened his eyes and gritted his teeth, saying, "You couldn't tell, I'm sick, tch. You have a fever, no wonder it felt so good to the touch. What a pity," regretfully withdrawing my hand. I stepped back and asked him calmly, "All right, tell me, why did you ask me to come?" He seemed startled once more. After a moment of daze, he said blankly, "Oh, don't you have anything to say to me?" "What is there to say? Should I say that my name isn't AW, or that I am the wife of the heir to the Marquis of Zhongqin, Or is it that my husband isn't dead, and we're just each keeping our own lovers? But I've never been one to explain myself, nor do I intend to start now. So I cut straight to the point. What do you want? Money, or a house? That finally got to him. He exploded. You want to break up with me? After breaking up with me, what then? Are you going to find another man? I'm telling you, don't even think about it. His tone was fierce. After saying this, he pounced, pinning me down, his scorching kisses raining over me like a storm. I didn't dodge. I even wrapped my arms around his neck, responding to him. It wasn't until he sensed my initiative and his grip loosened slightly that I suddenly flipped over, pinning him beneath me. I lifted his chin and asked, "Why won't you let me find someone else?" I asked knowingly. He didn't answer, just stared at me intently for a long time. It wasn't until I couldn't help but urge him that he gritted his teeth and asked me in return. The matter of the Jew family's legitimate daughter taking the initiative to propose marriage to the heir of the loyal and diligent Marquis is known throughout the capital. AWU, are you treating me as his substitute, or are you using me to get back at him? I thought he would question me about why I deceived him. And that's all. I was taken aback by his words. Pausing for a moment, after coming to her senses, she giggled and obediently planted a kiss on his lips. Have you ever seen a woman seeking a substitute do something like this? If I wanted to use you to get back at him, shouldn't I be announcing it to the world? Why would I hide it? I paused. She noticed his probing gaze and his suspicious expression. She lowered her head again to peck his lips, then let out a soft sigh. Actually, I didn't want to break it off either. But you know, I don't like trouble, and I don't like disobedience. I did hide some things from you. But those things won't affect the two of us. As long as you behave and don't make a fuss like my husband's mistress did, we can go on just as before. All right, it was the first time I had ever coaxed someone so softly, and I had done my best. Luckily, I didn't know whether it was because I had kissed him into submission or because he had a fever, but his mind seemed even more muddled. Shang Shiyu gave in, gritting his teeth. He laid down his terms. Then you're not allowed to touch him. And you're not allowed to find anyone else either. No other man will be better than me. I won't answer something that can't be guaranteed. I only stared at his reddened lips from the kiss. Then, may I feel your feverish self? I walked here today. My feet are so sore. Can you rub them for me? It really is best to find a mistress who isn't too bright, like Shang Shiyu, who gets appeased with just a little. Not only did he prove through action that even with a fever, he's better than others. After taking care of me, he thoughtfully offered to escort me back to my residence, but there was no way I was going to let him do that. After all, his appearance was quite striking. What if we ran into one or two people who knew me along the way? How would I ever explain that? Shang Shiyu, I like those who are obedient. I pressed him down to sit, speaking calmly. Seeing him dejected and unwilling to accept it. I cupped his face and bent down to kiss his forehead. I instructed, "Be good. We have a long future ahead of us, plenty of time." Shang Shiyu was forced to look up at me. I couldn't tell if it was because his back was to the candlelight, but his eyes staring at me seemed heavy and deep. After a long while, he finally nodded. Many times after, I would think, if I had understood the look in his eyes then, if I had noticed the anxiety and unwillingness in their depths, would there have been so many twists and turns afterward? But at that moment, having just been satisfied, I truly didn't take it to heart. Leaving Wui Street, I felt completely refreshed and clear-headed. It wasn't until I returned to the residence that I spotted Shen Chang'an from afar at my back door. As if he knew I would come back this way, he deliberately waited here, in the darkness, dressed in black and standing under the lantern. He looked like a ghost. By the time I realized and turned to hide, it was already too late. "My lady," he called out to me and slowly approached. His gaze swept over me, then landed behind me as he asked in a cool tone, "Where have you been so late?" Who is he? Him? Who? I was puzzled, turning to follow his gaze. I saw a tall man standing silently behind me. The man had broad shoulders and a narrow waist, with handsome features. His slightly upturned eyes were tinged with red at the corners, giving him a bewitching allure. Beneath his Adam's apple, there was a red mark I had just kissed. Who else could it be but Shang Shiyu? When did Shang Shiyu follow me here? Why did he follow me? How come I didn't notice? I have a bit of a headache and am also stunned. Before I could figure out how to answer Shen Chang'an, I heard Shang Shiyu speak up first. I'm the newly hired guard at the Jew residence. He showed no sign of guilt. Meeting my gaze, he quickly averted his eyes, his expression full of respect. As if he really were just a guard at my house guard. I narrowed my eyes. I looked coldly at the clothes he was wearing, which were almost identical to those of my family's house guards, and suddenly felt a surge of anger. But at the moment, I couldn't refute it at all. I could only glare sideways at Shen Chang'an and ask, "What are you doing here?" "I've come to pick you up." His gaze swept over me and Shang Shiyu, and he said succinctly, "I arrived at the hour of Shun." "But you weren't at the residence." The implication was that he was asking where I had gone today. How should I answer? No matter how I answer, it seems inappropriate, especially with Shang Shiyu's mention of the guard of Jew Manor. I don't even dare to go home. After all, I'd be exposed the moment I stepped through the door. Just as I was feeling troubled, the door suddenly opened from the inside. My mother came out. "I sent you to deliver a letter, and you really took it as a chance to relax. Aren't you going back to the mansion?" She helped me out of the awkward situation without any expression on her face. His gaze swept over the three of us, his tone unreadable. "Since you haven't left yet, young Master Shen, come in and join us for dinner." "Dinner? I've lost my appetite." The first thing I did upon returning home was to take Shang Shiyu back to my courtyard while my mother invited Shen Chang'an to the main hall. I dismissed the servants and had my trusted maid guard the courtyard entrance. After confirming that no one would enter, my expression turned cold, and without a second thought, I kicked the back of Shang Shiyu's knee. Caught off guard, he fell to his knees with a thud and dared not get up. Just stand up straight and look at me. I was also furious. Thought I was lucky to have raised a well-behaved one. Well-behaved my ass. I can't believe it's still negative. Act first and report later. You were well prepared, weren't you? Gripping his chin, I sneered, "Shang Shiyu, I never knew you had such capabilities. Do you realize that if it had been anyone else from the household opening the door today instead of my mother, Shen Chang'an could have spotted the flaw, and I might have been utterly disgraced. Are you trying to ruin me?" Shang Shiyu was somewhat flustered, but not much. His gaze didn't waver as he looked at me. I have absolutely no intention of harming you. I just can't accept it. Can't accept having to count the days on my fingers waiting for you." He paused for a moment, then lowered his head and tugged at the hem of my skirt. Though I couldn't clearly see his expression, I could distinctly see that his eyes had reddened. Is being a guard not good enough? You take me away, so I can see you every day." "Guard? See every day? How is this any different from what Tan Susu asked for?" I am not Shen Chang'an, indecisive and hesitant. If he had come to me openly and honestly, like my aunt, I could have considered his requests. But now, Shang Shiyu, I hate being manipulated the most. I pulled back the hem of my skirt, stepped past him, and didn't leave a single trace behind. I will not keep a disobedient, uncontrollable mistress. I returned to the loyal and diligent Marquis Manor with Shen Chang'an. Karma came too quickly. The more I mocked Shen Chang'an yesterday, the more annoyed I am today. All the way back to the Marquis's residence, my mind was filled with thoughts of keeping Shang Shiyu at the estate. When I told him that my mother would send him away from the capital, the expression of utter heartbreak on his face haunted me. Have you never had any feelings for me?" At that time, his face was deathly pale, his eyes red-rimmed as he asked me in a hoarse voice, "Feelings? Who has such a thing?" This is how I answered, but after returning to the residence. Watching Shen Chang'an head back to the main room to wash up, I still couldn't hold back and narrowed my eyes. Husband, have you managed to appease your mistress? Last night, he was unusually different, casting aside his sorrows, and wanted to consummate our marriage. At this moment, his expression was so calm that I suspected he was showing off. I was purely testing him. I thought he would brush me off coldly, just like before, but then I saw him pause his movements, look up, and say matter-of-factly, "My lady, let's have a child." I smiled, amused to the point of laughter. This time, there was no doubt. It was confirmed Shen Chang'an was treating me like a fool. Before getting in the car tonight, my mother pulled me aside and whispered a few words. She said, "Qingwei, your Aunt Yu's cousin works as an accountant at Yuchuan Hall. After the Shen family caused that big scene at the Marquis residence yesterday, the physicians from Yuchuan Hall were summoned. She is over 2 months pregnant. The Shen family hasn't dealt with her yet, and she's still staying at Huaihua Lane. My father's words might not be trustworthy, but I believe my mother and aunt's words 100%. My marriage to Shen Chang'an was arranged by his request for an imperial decree. Since it was an imperial decree, whether it was keeping a mistress or taking a concubine before the official wife had conceived, or the mistress becoming pregnant before the official wife and favoring the concubine over the wife, it would be no different from slapping the emperor in the face. But if I were pregnant, it would be completely different. If the legal wife is pregnant, whether it's taking a concubine or keeping a mistress, it can all be done justifiably. After all, men can't hold back for 10 months or a year. Everyone can understand and sympathize, but I can't sympathize even a little, because I don't want to be celibate for 10 months or a year. Last night you just found out your mistress is pregnant, and you couldn't wait to come to me to consummate our marriage. Did you suppress the rumors, waiting for me to give birth so you can legitimately bring her into the household? Oh, true love. I admit, I'm a bit jealous. Not because he's deeply devoted to his mistress and has no place for me in his heart, but because when he keeps a mistress, he can use a little trickery to bring her into the household openly and legitimately, while if I keep a lover, I have to hide him away for the rest of my life. The more I thought about it, the more upset I became. I sat down, crossed my legs, and gave him a disdainful glare. Shen Chang'an, although I have no say in our marriage either, if you come to beg me, I'm not entirely unwilling to take the initiative to arrange a concubine for you. At most, it'll just tarnish your reputation a bit, earn you a few scoldings from the emperor. It's not like you'll lose a piece of flesh, but you're not even willing to take this small loss. What? Trying to take advantage of me like I'm some easy target? I spoke bluntly. It was a jab at him for taking matters into his own hands last time. Originally, our families could have privately arranged the marriage, but he insisted on requesting an imperial decree to formalize it, using the wedding to draw the emperor's attention to the Marquis's household and help his father return to the court. That is to say, this time, he schemed against me once again. He's not stupid. How could he not understand? Sure enough, as soon as the words fell, his expression instantly turned cold, but his fists were clenched tightly, his gaze heavy. After a long moment, he closed his eyes and said, "Ju Qingwei, why must we be so tense and confrontational as husband and wife?" Didn't he feel tense and confrontational when he moved to Osmanthus Lane just 1 month after our marriage, and now he feels tense and confrontational? I felt like laughing again. Getting up, I patted his shoulder and gave a fake smile. "Don't worry, my dear husband, I will never have children with you in this lifetime. Sorry, I was born rebellious, always ready to draw my sword and pull my bow." It was a lively night. Mainly because I was lively. After throwing all of Shen Chang'an's belongings out of the bedroom, I locked the door. Finally, I don't have to worry about him suddenly getting inspired in the middle of the night and asking me to fulfill my marital duties. But this night, I still didn't sleep very soundly. In my dreams, one moment Tan Susu was hugging my leg, begging me to give her a proper status. The next moment, Shang Shiyu was kneeling on the ground, asking me why everyone else had a proper status while he could only be the kept lover. I had a bad dream. When I woke up, I heard from my mother's maid that Shang Shiyu had already been sent out of the capital. I decided to disguise myself and go to the male brothel to find a new lover. But the first one wasn't as handsome as Shang Shiyu. Second, the chest muscles aren't as impressive as Shang Shiyu's. Speaking of size, I said to the third one, "Take off your pants and let's see how big it is." The third one blushed, acting all shy and hesitant, nowhere near as straightforward as Shang Shiyu. If it were Shang Shiyu, I wouldn't even have to ask, he'd strip himself completely naked in an instant. I felt a bit disappointed and didn't choose any of them. I returned in low spirits, only to hear that my mother had sent someone with a message. Shang Shiyu has run away. Shang Shiyu has fled. He knocked out the people escorting him as soon as he left the capital and disappeared without a trace. My mother said I should keep a low profile recently and be prepared for him to retaliate out of shame and anger, but I think her worries are unnecessary. After all, Shang Shiyu isn't the brightest, so he couldn't think of revenge. Sure enough, 2 whole months passed without a single ripple. So quiet that my only 2 worries were, 1. Although Tan Susu hadn't caused any more trouble, Shen Chang'an, in order to quell the rumors and protect the Marquis's reputation, came back to the residence to stay every day. The other was that ever since I lost Shang Shiyu as my external distraction, I had all this energy and didn't know where to channel it. As time went by, I became increasingly restless and irritable, perhaps because I kept delaying. The miscarriage prevention medicine was sent to Huaihua Lane 1 dose after another. My mother-in-law, who had long confined herself to the ancestral hall to worship Buddha, finally couldn't sit still any longer. She suddenly demanded that Shen Chang'an and I accompany her to the incense fair at Liuhua Mountain Temple. Along the way, she subtly and overtly hinted at me, "As a woman, it is your duty to bear children and continue the family line. As the legitimate wife, you must not be jealous." When we reached the mountain, she even brought me into the side chamber. She had the Wang family's elderly lady, who is skilled in medicine, take my pulse and prescribe a fertility-enhancing formula. With so many pilgrims around, I couldn't make a scene, so I forced a fake smile. After listening to their coordinated performance and their roundabout lecturing, I finally found an excuse to step out for some fresh air. Outside, Shen Chang'an was standing quietly, seeing my cold expression and obvious displeasure. He still had to follow me and ask knowingly, "What did mother say to you? I don't want to deal with him." But just as I passed a small courtyard and was about to climb the steps, a delicate, charming female voice suddenly came from the courtyard. "Brother, I don't like the temple's vegetarian meals. Let's go down the mountain together in a while." His voice was low and cold. A single word made me freeze. I was all too familiar with that voice, so familiar that if the tone changed, with just a hint of breathiness, I could instantly recall how its owner looked in the throes of passion. Indeed, he paused in his steps and looked up. He saw a woman of distinguished status intimately holding onto a man's arm. The man she was holding onto was dressed in a dark blue robe and had a handsome appearance. Their eyes met, and he froze for a moment. I froze too. Because of that face, I would recognize it even if I turned to ashes. It was Shang Shiyu. He didn't leave. He returned to the capital to be someone else's kept lover. That thought had just crossed my mind. Then, a dignified and elegant woman emerged from the courtyard. The maidservant beside the woman respectfully addressed Shang Shiyu, saying, "Young master, it is time to offer incense." Young master. There were quite a few people in the capital who could be addressed as young master, marquises, princes, too many to count on one hand, but Shang Shiyu, no. It should be Jiang Shiyu. His status and position are different from those of other noble sons, because the woman following his gaze, the princess of Huayan, I had seen her at the empress's flower banquet. Obviously, She recognized me too, and she also recognized Shen Chang'an behind me. Is that Chang'an from the Zhongqin Marquis family? I remember you. We met when you were a child. Is your mother also at Liuhua Temple? What a coincidence. Why not join me for a vegetarian meal? The Prince of Huayan is the Emperor's full-blooded brother. After the Emperor ascended the throne, he specifically summoned their family back from their fiefdom, which shows their unique status. Of course, Shen Chang'an would not refuse the chance to be associated with the Prince of Huayan's household, so half an hour later, everyone, including the old lady of the Wang family, gathered in the vegetarian hall that the temple had specially reserved for the Princess of Huayan. During the meal, the ladies exchanged polite pleasantries. Shen Chang'an's gaze also wandered between me and Jiang Shiyu. He might have held back again and again, but in the end, he couldn't resist. After raising his cup of tea in a toast to Jiang Shiyu, he casually remarked, "You look familiar, young master. Have we met somewhere before?" Just an ordinary face. Many people have said the same to me. Jiang Shiyu remained composed, a polite smile playing at the corners of his lips. He looked at me deeply, his smile growing a bit brighter. I truly envy Brother Shen, who has such a good relationship with his wife that they come to offer incense together. Unlike me, without a wife, I can only accompany my mother and sister. Shen Chang'an didn't respond, merely pulling the corners of his lips politely. On the contrary, I was the one on edge, afraid that Jiang Shiyu might say something outrageous. I quickly made an excuse and slipped away. Shang Shiyu is the heir to the Prince of Huayan. This identity is truly astonishing. I was a bit angry and a bit ashamed. The thought of all the absurdities from before and his gaze just now made me wish I could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. So, after leaving the dining hall, when the maid reminded me that there were fewer people in the back hills and suggested I take a walk there, I didn't think much of it and went. It wasn't until I entered the woods and couldn't find a place to sit, and the maid went down the mountain to fetch a stool without waiting for my instructions, that I began to sense something was off. After a moment's thought, I decided not to wait for the maid and to go down the mountain first. But I had only taken 2 steps when someone suddenly covered my mouth from behind. Before I could even struggle, a tall figure enveloped me, locking me in his embrace. "AW, don't be afraid, it's me, it's Jiang Shiyu." He covered my mouth with one hand and wrapped his other arm tightly around me from behind. His strength is immense. It felt as if he wanted to crush me into his very being. His breathing heavy and labored as he spoke. "If I let go, will you promise not to scream?" Seeing me nod in agreement, he slowly loosened his grip. The moment of freedom was fleeting. Before I could speak, he leaned in and kissed me again. His kiss was urgent and fierce, as if he had gone mad. Only when I pushed him away and kicked him in the ankle did he let go in pain. I was utterly furious, looking around to make sure no one was there. She lowered her voice. "You're insane." He didn't answer, his eyes like deep pools, staring straight at me. "AW, when you first saw me today, you were angry. Why? Are you angry that I didn't leave the capital? Still mad that she is clinging to me?" With every word he spoke, he took half a step forward, until he was so close there was no space left, almost pressing right up against me. I didn't dare step back, because I backed down. I felt like a coward, so I also looked up, staring straight at him. "Is there a difference?" "Of course there is." His eyes lit up. "If it's the latter, then it proves that I'm in your heart." "Do you have him in your heart?" This conclusion made me somewhat irritable. I said with a cold expression, "Then you're going to be disappointed. There's no one in my heart except myself." But he wouldn't listen. In the past, if I rejected him once, he would sulk for half the day. Today, after I rejected him, he just lowered his gaze and fixed it on my lips, with deep, soulful eyes and a tone full of grievance. "I heard you went looking for a new flame the very next day after seeing me off. I haven't been home for months, and as soon as I returned, I was put under house arrest. The moment I was finally released, I immediately persuaded my mother to come to the temple to see you, but you said you didn't want me and then you didn't, and you were so close to Shunchangan. How heartless. I was stunned. After all, Shunchangan is my husband in name. He's not even a concubine now. What right does he have to criticize me? But I didn't have time to say it, because he took another step closer, grabbed my hand and pressed it against his chest, looking at me with eager eyes. Even if I don't have a place in your heart, I still like you. I've thought it through over the past 2 months. I want you, and it has to be you. Can I move back to the house on Wuyun Street? You can visit me whenever you're free, and I promise I won't cause any more trouble. His tone carried a faint plea. Under the palm, his heartbeat was rapid. My heartbeat quickened along with it. Admittedly, this proposal is very tempting, especially after feeling his firm, full chest muscles beneath several layers of fabric. I hesitated a little, but a noble prince, becoming my secret lover, an ordinary courtesan would be one thing, but the Crown Prince of Huayan holds a noble status, separated from me by an insurmountable gap. The slightest misstep could bring disaster upon myself. No, I don't want it. I shook my head and refused. Anyway, you didn't lose out before, so let's just pretend nothing ever happened. The words fell. Shang Xiu's expression fell, looking utterly aggrieved, but as he opened his mouth about to say something, his face suddenly changed dramatically. Be careful. He grabbed my shoulders and, with a slight exertion, swapped our positions. By the time I realized what was happening, the cold, gleaming sword had already pierced his shoulder. There's an assassin, more than one, 2 masked men, and their target seems to be me. Seeing the first sword miss, the other person directly drew his sword and thrust it toward me. I was a bit stunned, but instinctively dodged to the right, narrowly avoiding the strike. Just as the second thrust was about to come, Jiang Xiu kicked away the person who had stabbed him, gritted his teeth as he pulled the sword from his shoulder, and immediately countered to block the attack. His moves were swift and ruthless. Almost instinctively, he shielded me behind him as he moved. In no time, he had struck the opponent. Seeing his companion injured and unable to kill me, the other man didn't linger either. He shouted urgently, "Let's go!" In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them had retreated, until the 2 of them ran far away and their figures disappeared. Jiang Xiu clutched his wound and stumbled into my arms. In all my life, I had never even seen chicken or duck blood. Seeing his clothes soaked completely red, for the first time in my life, I felt a bit panicked. But I forced myself to stay calm and asked him, "Can you still walk? Let me help you down the mountain first." He did not answer, but held my hand tightly. Don't go just yet. If I don't say these words now, I'm afraid it will be too late." In his haste to pull me back, he moved too abruptly and aggravated his wound. Fresh blood began to spread once more, making his already pale face grow even paler. "I didn't mean to keep it from you. That day, I was tricked by a friend into going to the Southern Breeze house. After escaping and meeting you, I wanted to have a connection with you, so I had no choice but to fabricate an identity. And also, what I said earlier wasn't what I truly felt. That day, I intentionally followed you back to your residence because I didn't want to just be your external companion. I want to be with you, openly and honestly. If I manage to survive this time, could you give me a chance? Divorce him and marry me." Because of the pain, the thin sweat on his forehead gathered into beads, slowly dripping down. As he spoke, his hopeful eyes stared at me unblinkingly. Touched? No, I only have the urge to be furious and roll my eyes. I took a few deep breaths, barely managing to hold it in. A dying person wouldn't have as much to say as you. If you have time for dramatic farewells, you'd better hurry down the mountain and let a doctor check your head. Jiang Xiu fainted. Not sure if it was from anger or from pain. Before passing out, his eyes were red, and he glared at me angrily, as if he was about to cry. He was tall. The figure is right there. I can't move it. Fortunately, Someone soon came up from the foot of the mountain. It was Shen Chang'an. After a glance at Shang Shiyu lying on the ground, his eyes swept over me briefly, his expression grim. But in the end, he didn't ask and immediately ordered someone to carry Shang Shiyu down the mountain. Due to the presence of assassins, the temple fair was forced to end. On the way back to the residence, Shen Chang'an rode with me. He frowned, his fists on his knees tightly clenched. I probably held back for a long time, but couldn't hold back any longer. He asked me again, the heir to the Huayan prince. Is he the guard who returned to the mansion with you that night 2 months ago? Why did the two of you go to the woods behind the mountain alone? He finally no longer wore his usual cold and indifferent expression. My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't help but think, what was bound to happen has finally come. But I didn't answer, just calmly looked back at him and changed the subject. If you have time to worry about this, you'd better think about how to clean up the mess your mistress has made. Hearing this, he froze, his brow furrowing. What do you mean? I pretended to be surprised. Didn't I mention it? Today's assassin was targeting me. I've never made any enemies in the capital, although some people might not like my father, but no matter how you calculate it, the revenge won't fall on me. After all the calculations, the only person in the entire capital who holds a grudge against me is his mistress hidden in Huaihua Lane. When I'm out and about, to avoid any mishaps, I never let my maidservant leave my side. Yesterday, my personal maid scalded her leg with hot water. So today I had no choice but to bring your household's maidservant. Of course, this might just be a coincidence, but that maid led me to the back hill, then suddenly went down to fetch a stool. If the Crown Prince of Huayan hadn't noticed something was wrong and rushed over to block a sword for me, I would have long since departed for the underworld. There's no evidence, I'm purely speculating. Shen Chang'an didn't know whether to believe it or not. Leaving behind the words "I will investigate this thoroughly," he got off the carriage and rode alone to Huaihua Lane. That night, he did not return to the mansion. I wasn't idle either. I had an anonymous letter sent directly to the capital office, not for any other reason, simply because I didn't want to put up with the disrespect. The Crown Prince of Huayan was injured by an assassin. There was no need to report it to the authorities, as the capital prefect had already received the news and launched an investigation immediately. With the anonymous letter in hand, he immediately sent people to arrest Tan Susu. When my mother came early the next morning, I was still awake, she said. Last night, the capital prefecture captured 2 assassins on the mountain near the temple. The assassin confessed without hesitation, claiming that Tan Susu hired him to commit murder. Your Aunt Wen's uncle works at the Jingzhou prefecture. I heard that the mistress claimed to be pregnant with Shen Chang'an's child. She also said you intended to harm her, and that after she gives birth, they plan to get rid of the mother and keep the child. She sipped her tea calmly and asked me what I thought. I thought, I'm innocent, she's talking nonsense. But I don't know if my mother believed it or not. She gave me a light, fleeting glance. Your Aunt Xiong's cousin's daughter has connections in the Huayan prince's residence. Don't worry. That young master has already woken up and is perfectly fine. I was shocked. Why would I be worried? I suspect my mother knows something. After all, there are many concubines in the household, and the relationships are complicated, and she never plays a single game of mahjong in vain. But she doesn't say anything, nor does she expose me. Just before leaving, he patted my shoulder, as if seeing right through me. His gaze was incredibly affectionate. Qingwei, if your father needs to rely on your marriage to secure his position in court and curry favor with the emperor, then he lacks ability. Of course, this applies to any man. So, aside from yourself, you don't need to care about anyone else. After seeing my mother off, I finally let out a sigh of relief. Once my tense nerves relaxed, I inexplicably felt like crying. Since I was a child, I've always known my mother to be a free-spirited woman. She was so carefree that she didn't mind how many concubines my father took or whether he kept mistresses outside. so carefree that she was as close as sisters with all the aunts. She was even so carefree that, unlike others, she didn't teach me the 3 obediences and 4 virtues, but simply let me grow up freely. In the past, I often wondered if she even cared about me, but today, I seem to have found the answer. My mind is in turmoil. Lying in bed, I closed my eyes, but sleep was nowhere near, so when someone quietly pushed the door open and came in, I knew, Shinchongan doesn't walk like this when he returns. Thinking it might be Tan Susu's backup plan, I remained still. I intended to wait and see what the newcomer would do, but then I heard the person approach and sit down. Caught off guard, a weight pressed upon my lips. Immediately after, Jiang Xiu's muffled laughter reached my ears. "AWU. I know you're not asleep." I opened my eyes and looked at Jiang Xiu. My first thought was, "Are you crazy? This is the Zhongqin Marquis manor. How did you get in?" My second thought was to instinctively look at his shoulder. "Weren't you supposed to be dying from severe injuries? You seem perfectly fine now." I was being purely sarcastic, but I forgot that he's not very bright and can't understand implied meanings. Not only was he not angry, but his eyes sparkled as he grabbed my hands. "AWU.